Welcome to Naturally Inspired Radio, where we expose what's broken in the healthcare system, connect you to real health solutions, and inspire you to take back control of your life. We want to help you feel empowered, informed, and free to live naturally without fear, confusion, or dependency. Download our latest book on real solutions for health at naturallyinspiredradio.com. Naturally Inspired Radio is a nationally syndicated show broadcast on over 100 radio stations, online platforms, video channels, and podcast feeds. Follow us on your favorite platform today, hit that like button, leave a comment, and engage in our special live stream chats, Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Visit naturallyinspiredradio.com to learn more, register for our weekly giveaway, and explore past episodes. You can also connect directly with Tammy, follow her on all major social media platforms, and discover more about our featured guests and trusted radio partners. Are you looking for better health? Work with Tammy today and take the first step toward a healthier, more empowered lifestyle. Schedule your complimentary 30-minute lifestyle assessment to explore personalized guidance on nutrition, movement, toxin-free living, and natural beauty without pharma. Get started now and discover Tammy's preferred health products at naturallyinspiredstore.com or text Tammy directly 720-303-8868. Love the show and want to support the movement? Head over to naturallyinspiredradio.com and click on the support tab. There you'll find all the ways you can get involved. Join our Naturally Inspired community, become a preferred customer, attend one of our amazing live events, get your backstage pass for exclusive access, and connect to all things naturally inspired. Thank you for tuning in today. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
This focus, this urgency to develop a vaccine as a way to end the pandemic. Why not the same rush for therapeutics?
Well,
right? We actually saw the suppression of therapeutics.
Exactly, and that's a really good question. It appears to the casual observer that they really do not want you to get any kind of treatment for this. Mm-hmm. They don't even want you to know the vitamin supplements that will help. And now they're going after doctors that talk about vitamin D. Are you kidding me?
Today on the Naturally Inspired podcast, we have Dr. Lee Merritt joining us again. Dr. Merritt completed an orthopedic surgery residence in the United States Navy and served 9 years as a Navy physician and surgeon before returning to Rochester, where she was the only woman to be appointed as the Louis A. Goldstein Fellow of Spinal Surgery. Dr. Merritt has been in private practice of orthopedic and spinal surgery since 1995. She has served on the board of the Arizona Medical Association and is the past president of the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons. She has a long interest in wellness and fitness and has been fellowship certified by the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. Her recent speech at Doctors for Disaster Preparedness on SARS-CoV-2 and the rise of medical technocracy has been widely viewed on YouTube and forwarded on by Dr. Mercola, which is one of her medical heroes. She is married and the proud mother of 2 sons, one of whom carries on the 4-generation medical tradition as a general surgeon, and the other that is an electrical engineer. I hope you enjoy this episode of the Naturally Inspired podcast with Dr. Lee Merritt. Thank you so much, Dr. Lee Merritt, for being on the Naturally Inspired podcast. You're our only guest that's been here 3 times.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm honored. Wow.
You have so much awesome information that I just love chatting with you. And obviously our audience loves having you here because every time you come on, you just get so much attention through views and sharing and questions and all of that stuff. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing.
No, I appreciate you getting the word out.
Yeah.
We're all in this war together to save. This is really what we were just saying off air. This really is a war against humanity. I can't think of it any other way. And the vaccines are one part of it, these so-called vaccines. There are many facets to this.
Yep. I totally agree. So let's get up to date. Last time we spoke, you were in Washington, D.C. You've just gotten back.
Oh, yeah.
From the 6th of January. So that was an exciting time. But what have you been doing since?
Well, I've been all over, and I'm doing science. I'm kind of the science backup for Simone Gold at the AFLDS. I read the research papers and kind of cruise around on the internet and try and find out what's the latest going on. And also I'm the VAERS. I'm looking at VAERS, and I did send in a paper for publication. Typically the New England Journal didn't publish it, but I'm going to send it into the AAPS journal, or they've accepted it, but because I want it to get out. It's about some of the side effects we're seeing from these experimental genetic agents, and that's what they are. They're not vaccines. And the biggest one, I don't think we talked about this because I don't think we knew it on January 6th. It was it's thrombocytopenia. It's bleeding. Yeah. And those are two, and they may actually be kind of separate and related phenomena. They may not all be due to thrombocytopenia. So thrombocytopenia is where your platelets, these little cells in your blood, go down very low, and you spontaneously bleed. You always need platelets, even if you don't have an injury. You need platelets to stop up the little holes so that you don't have spontaneous bleeding. And so my interest started with a 56-year-old male OBGYN doctor in Florida who took the Pfizer vaccine. 4 days later, his platelets dropped down. He started having bleeding. He goes in and finds out his platelets are zero. Now, we never see that. Let me tell you, we never see zero. There is a disorder called idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura, and it drops your platelets down in maybe 20,000 or something like that, and maybe even lower. But it usually can be maintained. In other words, you can give people platelet transfusions. You can help them through this rough period and figure out what caused it. And usually you can find a drug, or it's just we never figure it out. But there's something we might be able to just tide them over until your bone marrow comes back. It's a bone marrow hit. But this is not that. They tried to save this guy, and on day 12, he died of a massive brain bleed because they could not, even giving him platelets, they could not stop the bleeding. So something is chewing up the platelets or clotting them. Dr. McCullough and others have said they think it's that the platelets are being antibody attacked and clotted together. We just don't know. But what we're seeing is, and so I looked at the VAERS, and I sent this in. Well, and I can actually, there's some interesting numbers here. So the VAERS, as you know, is the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, and it's run by the CDC. And anybody, by the way, you don't have to trust me. Anybody can look at this stuff, and you go to the VAERS Wonder Report, and you can check it yourself. But I'll just tell you some things that I looked at that are of interest, because I wanted to. We know that, and there was a Harvard study years ago that looked at when they say there are 100 cases of something in VAERS, what is it really? Because we know it doesn't all get reported. Okay. So, and they said that represents 1 to 10% of what's reality. So if it's 100, it could be between, 1,000 and 10,000. Okay. So keep that in mind. These numbers sound small, but they're not. Yeah. So this
I can actually attest to that because my son had ITP from a flu shot. Oh,
interesting.
Yes, from a flu shot when he was 2 years old. So he recovered. He's 18 now, but he got ITP from a flu shot. That's kind of what started me on this path of natural health.
Oh, wow.
So, but I did not report it. Because we presented at the emergency room and they didn't know what it was.
And they didn't probably report it.
They didn't report it.
Well, and I'm going to tell you my story recently. So another thing we're seeing is neurologic damage, including ascending paralysis, or Guillain-Barré.
Yes.
Ascending paralysis is what they call it. And I saw a patient that she'd had the vaccine. A week later, she got weakness in her legs. And she was putzing around at home, but couldn't make it. And a week after that, she had to be admitted to the hospital. And when she was seen at that point, at the 2-week mark now, she was able to talk to my colleague and tell him that she had back pain and leg weakness. So he called me. I'm a spine surgeon, thinking, okay, I should, maybe there's something here. So I go in and he was unaware of the vaccine issue. So I went in and saw her, and I basically couldn't even talk to her, because by the time I saw her 24 hours later, she couldn't open her eyes, couldn't open her mouth.
Oh my gosh.
So she'd had a serious neurologic hit here from this. And I finally found out. I said, what's the vaccine status? And he didn't know, but we looked back, it was 2 weeks. So I said, you should report this in VAERS. And he said to me, what's VAERS? Yep. So the problem is, that is true. And I'm not sure, if I hadn't been involved in the flu vaccine issue years ago, because when they brought out mandates, I wouldn't have been in this fight now. I wouldn't have understood any of this. But I started doing, which doctors all over should start doing. Look at the raw data yourself. Do not trust their interpretation. Do not trust what Big Pharma tells you. Just look at the data and decide if it makes sense. You can look at the FDA studies, and that's been done with these things. But here's just some interesting stuff. From the first, these are all, I looked at the first quarter. One of the things you can do is you can pick date, vaccine, you can pick all sorts of things, and then sort it. Okay. And you have to sort it by ID first to know how many totals there are, because otherwise you'll get duplicates. But here's what it was. So this is just the total deaths. And this is a while back. It's way over 3,000 now, or 4,000 in VAERS.
Yeah, 3,800.
Yeah, this is 3,800 now. But this is back when it was less. But the first quarter of 2018, now this is all vaccines put together, there were 12. The first quarter of 2019, there were 18. The first quarter of 2020, there were 23. The first quarter of 21, 2,917. So that's a pretty big jump from the average of like 20. Okay. So then you look at that, and 99% of those are the COVID vaccine. 1% are all the other vaccines put together. Now, thrombocytopenia, I looked up, and that's so rare. I mean, but like you said, and this is in the first quarter of 2018, 2019, and 2020, they all reported 2 cases, like your son. But in 2021, we had 94 cases. So orders of magnitude. And the last one is, there's a really weird disease, and it's kind of, you think of the world and you think about, somehow I'm here because things have been put in. I feel like God's put me here for a reason, because things all my life has been putting me into this spot for some reason. But one of the funny ones is, when I was a little kid, how many 10-year-olds know about, or 12-year-olds know about cavernous sinus thrombosis? Well, my dad was a doctor, and he was of a research bent, although he was a small town physician. He had multiple PhDs, and he basically said, he was telling me about cavernous sinus thrombosis is, you have a big vein in your brain. It kind of the circle of Willis, it's a big circular vein, and we have other veins that connect into it, and it makes this big cavernous, like a venous blood that's somewhat slow moving. And if you get an infection in the facial area, it can infect that, and that can be very fatal. So his point to me when I was a little kid was, don't pinch your pimples. That was how I knew about cavernous sinus thrombosis. But it's become a big thing here. So cavernous sinus thrombosis, if you looked in the VAERS for 2018, 0, 2019, 0, and 2020, there was 1. But in the first quarter of 2021, there are 40. And I've heard that worldwide there are over 350 cases. Now, I've never seen a case in my entire career. My son, who does ICU and trauma, he's a general surgeon, he has seen cases, but that's his job. They all funnel to him. If it's going to happen to you, you're going to come. And the other thing to say is, he's in the ICU and training recently. So he'd be there for the vaccine ones. I don't know if he's seen them when he was earlier in his career. I'm going to ask him that. But so that's where we are. We're seeing a lot of very different problems. And I've never seen this many damaged and dead people before they stopped a vaccine. This is out of proportion to anything I've ever seen. Right.
Because even back in the 70s with the swine flu, they put a halt on it.
Right. And I'm going to tell you, what's the follow-up of the swine? This is a point. What is the follow-up of the swine flu that we still are fighting? And it's the neurologic damage that was caused by the medications that came out, the vaccines specifically, to combat the swine flu, which turned out not to be a pandemic to begin with. Did we not learn anything? Well, actually we did. And there were people in academia who said, we should never rush a vaccine, no matter how urgent the notion. And that was based on what happened with respiratory syncytial virus. Respiratory syncytial virus was rushed out, and it ended up killing 20 some children, infants, because they didn't test it on infants because it was a big rush. Okay. What are we doing today? Literally, we've not learned the lessons. And they said, no matter the urgency of the moment, don't rush anything like this. And we're doing it again. And and people have been talking about these fake pandemics to push drugs. And I didn't really pay attention, but it does seem to be a pattern. Yes. Declare something a pandemic, make an emergency rush to produce a vaccine, which means there's no independent oversight. There's no long-term testing. This is how we got the Gulf War syndrome. Okay. The Gulf War syndrome, and we may have talked about that. The Gulf War syndrome came from squalene. Okay. That was the first time I think that they used squalene as an adjuvant in a vaccine. Most people went over to the Gulf and they didn't get the Gulf War syndrome. But those who did, they traced back to one batch of the anthrax vaccine that was that had squalene in it. So that means that the and they found that the antibodies, people had anti-squalene antibodies almost 100% of the time if they had the syndrome, and almost 0% of the time without the syndrome. So it's pretty just convincing. Well, what's happening today is now they've put squalene back into some vaccines, including it's part of the adjuvant for Pfizer and Moderna. I don't know about Johnson & Johnson on that one, but the Matrix M adjuvant that they're using in these two has squalene as part of it's one of its components. And that's, as I understand, it's hard to sleuth this out because it's very hard to, they don't tell you these things. You have to find them from, this led to this, and then we go to the research and they say it was in this, and I find that the producer of part of this thing says it's in this. It's not easy, and they're not making it easy.
Well, and we've seen videos now with the insert that comes with the vials is completely blank.
Completely blank. I saw that. And I don't think that's made up. I don't
think so.
They showed how they opened up the exact box and it was there like that. So, and obviously they must have seen that before. They wouldn't have done that on camera. So,
right. Well, one thing I want to add to that is that therapeutics. So like we have this focus, this, urgency to develop a vaccine as a way to end the pandemic. Why not the same rush for therapeutics? Well, right? We actually saw the suppression of therapeutics.
Exactly. And that's a really good question. It appears to the casual observer that they really, really, really do not want you to get any kind of treatment for this. They don't even want you to know the vitamin supplements that will help. And now they're going after doctors that talk about vitamin D. Are you kidding me? Dr. Mercola, I've really valued Dr. Mercola over the years because of his excellent writing. You can be sure if he's telling you something, he's researched it, he's referenced it. You can look at the references yourself. You never have to just take his word for it. I really like what he does. And they're coming after him to the point he is not going to have any information about vitamin D and zinc on his website. How catastrophic is that kind of censorship?
Yep.
And for people that are listening, just to understand, we've known that vitamin D is important to your antiviral immune system. We've known that for decades. To deny it is just denying 20 years of research, including the flu. The Japanese, there was a study, and there's probably many of these, but I remember this one where it was in children, and they showed that getting a vaccine for children is much less effective than getting your vitamin D level up above a certain level. And the Indonesians in this situation showed that when they looked at in one hospital where there were about 800 people in the hospital with COVID, they looked at who's going to the ICU and dying versus the majority of people that are going to recover and go home. And what's the difference between those two groups? This is the thing I kept kicking my computer screen and saying, come on, CDC, when I still thought they really cared about us. Silly. When I kept kicking my computer screen and saying, why don't they look at those two groups? This is clearly bimodal. 99 point some percent recover, but there's this small group that die. Who are they? Well, the Indonesians, thank God, CDC for all the billions of dollars didn't do it, but the Indonesians looked at it and they determined that if your vitamin D level was above 30 nanograms per deciliter, so the magic number is 30, you had a less than 4.5% chance of going to the ICU or dying. So that's 96% in your favor of survival. If you just, and 30 is not much. I want my vitamin D level to be 60 or above. So, that is simple. Now, that's simple cheap, and we know that it's true. Why
Mm-hmm.
are we not telling people that? So they're not telling people stuff we've known and we've had in the literature for a long time. They're not telling us what we've discovered, that zinc is important, and they do know that in the basic science literature,
Mm-hmm.
that hydroxychloroquine doesn't work without zinc, and zinc itself helps. And you know why I know they knew this stuff? Think about airborne. What does it have in it?
Yes.
It has vitamin C, zinc, and these other things. Okay, so they knew about it. They just didn't want us to know.
Mm-hmm.
And they really, not only did they lie about hydroxychloroquine being ineffective, because it is very effective if given early. We've had 3 spontaneous, you can think, I don't think so, explosions, fires, total devastation of hydroxychloroquine plants or precursor plants. And the last one in Taiwan was definitely the number 2 producer of hydroxychloroquine in the world. They've also gone after a Canadian couple that produced hydroxychloroquine, and they've been just hounded. And I don't know if I think they're out of business. I can't remember the story, but I'm going to look that up. But that's a big one. So basically, this thing's been going on for a long time. They've been preparing us by not, and in fact, the Institute of Medicine years ago. Now, I'm an orthopedic surgeon, and I see people with adult rickets, which is lack of enough vitamin D. They call it osteoporosis much of the time. That it's really not. It's a combination of osteoporosis, or it's simply osteomalacia, which is vitamin D deficiency. And you can tell the difference on the X-ray fracture patterns,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the spine. And that's what I did with spine surgery for years. So I saw these all the time. These little old ladies that were they were crumbling down, but they weren't really crumbling. They were kind of like schlumping, because vitamin D deficiency fails to mineralize bone. So you get soft bone. Mm. And osteoporosis is normal bone, but not enough of it. But vitamin D deficiency is very characteristic. So I'm seeing this all the time. Mm-hmm. The literature in orthopedics says we should take 5,000 units a day as an adult. Yep. And yet, what does the Institute of Medicine say? The government-funded purported think tank of the great brains in medicine. Oh, if you take more than $400 international units a day, you're just wasting your money. It just makes you expensive urine and blah, 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 blah. I can't stand those people. I'm really offended now what they've been doing to us for decades. This is they've been preparing the field so we are sicker and sicker. Yep. So this will pick us off. I just can't believe anything else at this point. But basically they took away I think they burned down these hydroxychloroquine plants. You can't tell me that by accident 2 magnesium stearate plants, one in Mexico, one in Illinois, blow up the same day.
Yeah,
and then
day.
And then about a year later, we get this other one torched in Taiwan when that didn't solve the problem. So I'm sorry. This is a war against us. We need to wake up.
Yep.
And realize that they're trying everything they can do to get us to take an experimental genetic agent that appears to be damaging our reproductive system and is killing a bunch of people outright, especially the older people. Mm-hmm. I mean, the other thing is, as much as people don't, and I don't really care if anybody calls me a conspiracy theorist anymore.
I don't either.
I don't really care that, because there's a reason we also don't want to use that word. That was a CIA program about the Warren Commission. But more than that, in World War II, when they tried the doctors, the Nazi doctors, they tried them in Nuremberg, and 7 of them hung on the gallows for crimes against humanity. It was conspiracy to commit crimes against humanity. Okay. Yeah. Dr. Carl Brandt didn't kill anybody. And I know I'm getting off course a little bit, but it's important to see why we're not getting treatment that we need. And Dr. Carl Brandt was an excellent surgeon who didn't personally kill anybody. In fact, personally, he saved many lives, including one of Hitler's henchmen, how he ended up on the gallows, because he got ingratiated with Hitler when he saved somebody's life in a car accident, and became the head of the German medical department. And that medical department these guys were tried, their conspiracy for crimes against humanity. One of the counts was that they allowed experimentation, or they experimented themselves. Someone were involved, but he wasn't. He just was in the titular head of this. They experimented on camp prisoners, and a prisoner by definition should be considered coerced, just because they're not a free person. Okay, experimenting on prisoners and military, in my opinion, for the same reason, is extremely unethical. But if you look at the Nuremberg Code and what it were derived of, it said you should not have experimented on people under duress. You should not have forced people to be involved in the experiment, and you should have given them informed consent. What are we doing today? We have doctors all over this country, and I'm speaking to doctors now. Get your heads out of the sand and wake up and get off this bus before we ride it over, just like the German doctors. We're going over a moral cliff. This is an experimental vaccine, and you're experimenting on the whole friggin' world, the whole world, and without adequate safety trials.
Absolutely. And there's a German lawyer now who's heading up a team of 1,000.
Oh, Rainer Fulmisch. Yeah. He's my hero. Excellent. Excellent guy. But they're experimenting on people without their consent. They do not get informed consent. I'm sorry, rolling up your sleeve is not informed consent.
No.
And they're not telling them. For example, one of the things I was asked by Simone Gold to give her, and this is for, I think, a congressional thing they're looking at, what you would put in an informed consent notification for this vaccine trial program. And for example, there's a group of doctors that say one of the things you absolutely should tell people is that if you take this vaccine, you might die or be seriously injured by a secondary exposure to the virus. That's called antibody-dependent enhancement. We know that's what killed the animals in the animal trials.
Right.
Well, we're seeing it already, and we're going to see more of it probably in the fall when the new virus season comes around.
Right.
So that should be in the informed consent. It's not in there. And they're not telling you the other things that are happening.
Well, and we're seeing it just like on social media platforms, just regular people within our communities where people who work in healthcare are coercing people to come down and get their free shots. Those people are not.
The Third Reich, guys.
Yes.
You're doing what the doctors did in the Third Reich. It is not moral. Even if you feel that the vaccines are great, do not lie, do not cheat, do not coerce people into taking an experimental drug. If you want to put out your information, that's fair. But don't tell people you can't travel if you don't take it.
Yeah.
Don't tell
people you can't go to school.
You won't be able to come into the hospital for treatment, or you won't be able to work, or you won't be able to. That's coercion. So just give informed consent, honest informed consent, and no coercion. I'm fine with that. Yeah. Even though I think this is a deadly vaccine program, it's not a vaccine, but a deadly program. People, and I'm a libertarian, people have the right to make their own choices. And if they make bad choices, that's freedom. You cannot, I'm not going to force you to not take the vaccine. Don't force me to take any medical treatment.
Absolutely.
How about our bodies, our choice? What happened to that?
I know.
And let me just finalize that point. If you don't own your own body, you're a slave. So when your boss says, if you don't take the vaccine, you can't come to work, just decide if you want to stay on the plantation or not. That's what you are. You're a slave, and he's told you what you have to do.
Absolutely. Let's talk about this shedding stuff, because this is, well, first of all, I think the first thing I saw with the shedding was that women's cycles were being affected.
Right.
And I know shedding, it's they've done such a great job at confusing terms, right? Because now they've added a second term to the definition of vaccine. And they did that so that we will be comfortable taking the shot, because if they called it an experimental gene therapy, which is what it is, people wouldn't be comfortable. So what they did is they actually added an additional definition to the term vaccine. And now that a vaccine includes mRNA technology, that's now added to the definition. Yeah. So when we think of shedding in terms of like the measles and other vaccinations, we think of the virus shedding off.
Right.
What is this? Because this is not that, right? Because there is no virus in this vaccine.
Well, maybe not.
Okay.
The unknowns, I'm going to tell you. In fact, I sent this out. I'm on a texting group with Sherry Tenpenny and some other, doctors that you would know, yes. I think. Yeah. And it's like, I said, would somebody please clarify this for me? Do we really think there's a coronavirus outbreak? Is there a SARS-CoV-2, and does it cause disease? Because the more I study, the more I read, the more confused I get. Yeah. So I'm just going to point out that you could, in theory anyway, you could explain this whole 2020 outbreak without a SARS-CoV-2 virus. It could just be this S1 subunit, okay? It turns out when you look at this whole big virus, okay, and then they say, well, it's only the spike protein that's causing the problem. Right. And then it's only the S1 subunit of that spike protein. That was what was manipulated in the lab to create a cleavage area. They put a genetic change into this S1 subunit of the spike protein of this big virus. That's what got changed. And by that change now, they say that the spike protein allows the whole coronavirus, which they now call SARS-CoV-2, this aberrant coronavirus, to attach to your ACE2 pathways and make you sick.
Right.
Well, that's their explanation for it. They don't talk about the man-made manipulation of the spike protein, but we know that's what happened. Mm-hmm. But it really, in my opinion, you could explain this whole outbreak if somebody were just if this was aerosolizable and you just aerosolized the S1 subunit. I mean, I'm not enough of a virologist, and I'd like to really talk to, Judy Mikovits or somebody that really understands this stuff, and I should give her a call. But the point is that I used to think that this disease was caused by SARS-CoV-2, a manipulated virus that made a bunch of people sick, but the virus transmitted from person to person. That's what I thought. But I'm just going to tell you, I don't think we need to believe there's a whole virus involved here. What it could be is that this manipulated part of the subunit can be transported person to person, and that the coronavirus tests, whatever they're testing for, may test a lot of people. I mean, they cycle amped it up, so we don't really know how many people really tested positive. So think about this. You could have had a release, and there was something interesting happening that people don't talk about either on October 19th. When we said this thing broke out mid-October, October 19th, same day as the Event 201 of Gates and Johns Hopkins stuff in New York, on October 19th was the Wuhan Military World Games in Wuhan, China. Okay, nobody talks about it. But the athletes, both the French, there's a good article on the National File, French and American athletes went over there, and they got sick when they got over there. And they're saying they got sick right away. Now, there's an incubation period. So how'd they get sick right away? I mean, that's my first question. I'm just throwing out questions. I don't have answers here.
Right.
And then when they came back, they got more sick. Again, think of the time course of young people. So that's maybe the first outbreak. And they came through the Seattle airport, which is where did we first notice this? But then later we get New York City. How easy would it be to, in Wuhan, which also had 5G, by the way, and so did New York City. So we spray out this S1 subunit. It makes a bunch of people sick. But notice how quickly it stopped in Wuhan.
Yes.
And same in New York City. We spray out, a bunch of people get sick. We get all excited. All these things happen. It quickly stops. Mm-hmm. What if we created the panic with not a virus, but with a bioweapon? And then because we did it at the peak of flu season, everybody that got the flu got a false positive test. And that's what's going on. Wouldn't that be something? So when you ask me about what's the shedding, that's the first thing I have to go back and stop and say, what is this? Okay, now we have this problem with people that are this is a very clear history that we're getting all over. And like I say, I'm an orthopedic spinal surgeon. If I've had 5 people report this to me personally, what are the general doctors seeing? They must be getting overwhelmed with this if their patients aren't afraid to talk to them. One of the reasons they talk to me is I'm willing to listen to these stories and not think people are crazy. Right. So, but I've had, and 3 people I thought deserved treatment, or I could treat them. 2 were away from my area. But one of them, menopausal woman, not having any bleeding for a long time, co-workers in her tight little small office, 3 of them get vaccinated and she starts bleeding. Okay, the 3 men get vaccinated, she starts bleeding right away. Second one, a child who was doing well, and then the family next door gets vaccinated and she goes over place with their children. And she starts having flu-like symptoms and a node that pops up in her neck. And then the third one is that had been told to me personally was a pregnant woman who's in the second trimester. And she also was home. She wasn't around vaccinated people. She's unvaccinated. Everything was fine. Second trimester is not where you have miscarriages. She goes back to work. She's around all these vaccinated people. She starts having bleeding and cramping. And again, I thought that person needed to be treated. Now, the good news is, but we don't know. I mean, doctors, we're talking among ourselves. What do we do for these people? And nobody knows for sure. In my opinion, hydroxychloroquine is the safest thing we know in pregnant women. I mean, it's a very safe drug. And it works by stopping viral replication. Now, ivermectin may work by binding to the spike protein in some way. So nobody's got the perfect answer here yet, but some people probably need treatment. The real issue is, how much are the rest of us at risk? So we don't know how it's shedding, although we have one case that should, this, in my opinion, this case alone, in conjunction with that 56-year-old doctor and the 104 thrombocytopenia cases I identified in VAERS, should have stopped this outroll of this vaccine program right now. The doctor dies, something we've never seen. We've got over 100 thrombocytopenia and many leading to death in VAERS. And now we have a baby who's totally normal, breastfeeding, mother takes the second Pfizer vaccine, baby dies of thrombocytopenia. Are you kidding me? This is
transferred it through her breast milk.
It is a transfer through breast milk. That alone should get us to stop. And then it's nice to have, when you stumble across, and I didn't figure this up. I think Greg Reese is an excellent reporter. He's on InfoWars, and I think he does some independent reporting, but he does excellent video, little news things. And he mentioned the term, because even suspicious me, thinking that this is really a war against humanity, I didn't even consider the possibility that these psychopaths running this program have developed self-disseminating vaccines. I didn't think of that. They have. And he said that, and then I started looking up the research. The pharmaceutical chemical giants have discovered and have been working on self-disseminating vaccines. And it's, if you go back years ago, it's for animal zoonoses, meaning, maybe rabies carrying rodents or something, and there are too many of them. So you vaccinate one and it spreads to 20 more and blah, blah, blah. Well, anytime you mess with Mother Nature, you screw things up, quite frankly. So I'm opposed to anything you can't turn off. Don't give me some kind of, it's like when they transplanted Japanese ladybugs into America to deal with some kind of aphid. Okay. And now we've got these horrible Japanese ladybugs that bite you, stink, and are horrible, and they've still got aphids. So it didn't work. It's never a good idea to just decide you're going to do better than God. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. So I don't want to see it even in animal species. I'm just going to say, I don't want a self-disseminating vaccine that we don't know the long-term outcome. We might throw off the whole ecosystem. But now it turns out they really were looking at this. In 2015, I found papers looking at this for human vaccines. So even if they worked, what kind of immoral purpose, who are these? That's why I call them psychopaths. Who would give you a medicine or it's a medical treatment that you would automatically pass on to others without their knowledge or wish?
Well, this is what I can't understand why people think, like, would I take my uncle's heart medication?
Right.
Why is it one treatment is sufficient?
It's never been one size fits all. Now that has been for a long time. I'm going to say, when people say, oh, I'm not going to let them mandate this, I kind of point out to them, you've let them already mandate your children take worthless vaccines. A worthless vaccine being like, not that it doesn't work, that it's not necessary, like mumps, and may do more harm than good.
Right.
Okay. Just risk benefit. So here we have now vaccinating children with this. I mean, parents, wake up. They're after you. They're after your children specifically, and generations unborn. So the children have no real risk from this disease. Yes, you always find some deaths, but there are secondary issues usually involved. Children don't die from mumps. There's the rare case, but the rare case doesn't justify vaccinating the children of the entire world, okay, or the entire America. But we've been doing that for years. So now it's just they've gotten us conditioned to have abandoned risk-benefit analysis, and now we're going to do it with this.
Yeah. And I think that the sad thing for me is that, I didn't know anything about vaccine adverse reaction until it happened to us.
Right.
Right. And so now I'm forced to learn about all this stuff.
Right.
But then the general population is pitted up against you like you're crazy. Oh, well, that's just your kid.
Right. The general population. Well, that's, in the Soviet Union, when Stalin was just randomly taking people's name out of out of the phone book and killing them. And things, such weird bad things would happen. But if it didn't, but a lot of people, it was so far apart at first that nobody appreciated it. And the Russian phrase was, it's true when it happens to you.
Yeah.
That's the problem. But by the time it happened to you, you were in the Lubyanka being murdered. Okay.
Right.
And same thing with vaccine injury. I mean, I'm in the same boat. I vaccinated my children. My professor of pharmacology became the head of the FDA when I was in Rochester, New York. I mean, I believed everything they told me right up until about 2010, maybe 2009. It was about when they started mandating flu vaccine in the hospital. And the first thing that struck me about that was, no, wait a minute. You're going to tell the nurses you have to have a vaccine to work in the hospital, or you have to wear a mask all the time. But at 5 o'clock when you're off shift, they don't care if you have a vaccine. You can come in like any other family member and go and hug your loved ones and your friends and gossip and walk around the hospital. What? Yeah. Okay. So on the face of it, it did not make scientific sense for contagion control. And then when I looked into further, I found there were no studies that demonstrated it actually was beneficial for contagion control. So why are they doing it? You know what I mean? And that's when I started finding all like the French studies, not too much in American literature. Isn't that funny? Because we own all these pharmaceutical companies here. Right. But in the French literature and other literature, there's all sorts of stuff about the damage that the aluminum and all the different adjuvants do. So we've known about it for a long time. But now it's coming home. As I said to people, you're not a nurse, you're not paying attention, but wait till it bites you. It's going to come for all of us someday. And that's where we are now. It's coming for us. It's coming for everybody. And what bothers me is, see, the people that are objecting, when you start speaking out against, like, showing them that there were vaccine injuries, to deny that, we know that all drugs can cause somebody to have an allergic reaction, for example. To deny that that's true or meaningful is to tacitly accept the proposition that all vaccines, and you can say all drugs, but all the drugs and all vaccines are always safe in all people all the time. That is what the vaccine promoters say when arguing with anti-vaxxers. They're not saying it in those words, but they're saying you're crazy for thinking there could ever be vaccine damage. Yes. Because all vaccines are always safe in all people all the time. That's our belief.
Yeah. But they write it right on the insert. They write right on the insert, may cause ITP. But you're still... They
don't tell you that.
No.
Where was your informed consent by the person giving you the vaccine? And see, that's the other person. That's the other problem. And here's where my own profession is extremely culpable, that we have bought into this. And even more than doctors who have been blindly going on in faith in authority and giving recommendations for vaccines they really know very little about and have not studied the actual data. I studied the actual data, for example, on flu vaccine that was used for the flu vax, it was two different ones, flu vax, and there was another name, I can't remember. I don't think it was Fluad, but it was a couple of them. And I looked at 3 years in a row, and I looked at the data, and I looked at the epidemiology and the whole thing, and what they said about their actual vaccination. And if you look at, like, just in flu, if you multiply simple probabilities, if you multiply the times that to figure out if it's effective, you have to look at how many times will you not mount a reaction. In other words, in older people that their immune system isn't very good, even if I give you the vaccine, you might not react to it. And then you have a probability that you're already immune, in which case it didn't do you any good, even if you react. And then there's a probability that they pick the wrong antigen. Okay. And then there's other things, but those are the big three, but then the probability of not being exposed to it during the flu season, okay, depending on where you live. So there's lots of variables. And when you look at it, the best you can do, when I came up with it, and I challenge anybody to look at this data and do it yourself, but you better not trust their answer. You do the math and you do the answer. And I came up with 10%. Now, remember last year on the flu season, what did they say? Oh, we missed it this year. It was only 10% effective. I will tell you, on just on basic probabilities alone, the best you can do is 10% effective.
So you're taking on that risk for 10%
That's right.
coverage.
And this gets back to, in medicine, we have a thing called number needed to treat. And it means how many people do you have to treat that don't get benefit for the person to get benefit? I became aware of this in orthopedics, looking into Fosamax and these bisphosphonate drugs to keep people from having problems with osteoporosis, especially older women.
Mhm.
And, they came and they sold you on this, and I used it stuff at first, they sold everybody on this idea. Oh, do this, 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 this. It's great. And you will cut down on the number of fractures by 50%. Well, that sounded like a good number, but it turns out if the number of fractures on average is 2, and you cut it down by 50%, it's 1. Mm-hmm. So now 99 women needed to get treatment for that one who missed the fracture. Okay. Mm-hmm. The number needed to treat is 99. That's not in this flu vaccine. At the best, the number needed to treat is 90.
Right.
Okay. So, that's one of the ways to look at this. And there's some of that is more complex than the average person is going to do. Yeah. But the average person should really step back and understand that this is like a new car line. And maybe I said this, but how many people are afraid to buy the first edition of a new car line because they're afraid the bugs aren't worked out? Mm-hmm. And here they are running and getting into line and forcing their relatives and their unborn child to take a vaccine of something that has not been well worked out. There are no safety studies to tell us how long this RNA sits around, right?
Right.
We don't know. One of the things we all debate as doctors is how do we find out how long this RNA sits around? Where are the studies? We keep looking for them. We can't find any. So that's a big question, because if it sits around too long, it gives you autoimmune disease. If it doesn't sit around long enough, it's more likely to give you antibody-induced enhancement. So there's a lot they do not know, and they're not telling us. So people should be aware this is a completely experimental, unapproved genetic agent that very little is known by the average doctor, and even and maybe a slightly more by the average research doctor, but the only people that really know are at the top of the pyramid of the research arm.
Right, which is interesting because we know that Bill Gates doesn't want to give up his recipe. And if it really was about health, right, I just reported yesterday on a video that there are manufacturing plants ready and willing and able to produce this vaccine. He will not hand over the recipe. If this truly was about health and saving lives, why would he not hand over the recipe?
Well,
some people say it's money and it's intellectual property, which I'm sure it's part of that. But I also want to know why so secretive.
Well, but it isn't about money, according to him. Remember, he's a big philanthropist. Yeah. This is all the goodness of his heart. Yes. Even though he and all his rich buddies have their billionaire profiles, they've gotten 30 to 60% improvement in their financial status as we've been dying as small businessmen. Small businessmen collapsing. It's an economic war. Okay, part of this is an economic war, and they're using this whole vaccine and the lockdowns and everything to destroy small business. Yep. So, he does it. So for him to say, well, I don't want to give it out because I have a patent and I want to make money on it, is going against what he's already said, that he's a great philanthropist and this is about saving the world, saving the world with vaccines, but he never makes clean water for poor people. No. He never does other things that would matter. And he always gets caught with things like, HCG and the tetanus vaccine, things that cause miscarriages and sterilization. Yep. Again, anybody wants to say I'm a conspiracy theorist, just go to the MIT website, unless they've just recently scrubbed it, and you can find, I think it's a Dr. Langer it's Langerman, something like that, who worked with Bill Gates through, I think, Jeffrey Epstein's intermediary connections. To produce an implantable birth control chip. It's a trilaminar device that can be turned on and off remotely.
Wow, I hadn't read that.
Yeah, go look it up. That's on the MIT website. He's very proud of that. So trust me, it's not what he says he is. Yeah. If he is who he says he is, that's another question. I know this whole thing's gotten crazy, but these, since I was on here, one of the other studies I discovered, because people always say, who are they? Who are they? There are people that see the world as completely unconnected pixels. Mm-hmm. Okay. At some point, the pixels make a picture. And one of the points in the one pixel that really, in my opinion, helps to make a picture is a study by a guy named Gladfelter. And he's a Swiss guy. And this was in 2011. He took all the corporations, probably above a certain size. I'm sure my little corporation didn't make the grade, but there were 37 million worldwide corporations of a certain size. These are the corporations of the world, essentially, 37 million of them plus. And he put them into a supercomputer, and they looked at the commonalities to try and figure out how many of those are owned by other companies that really, when you get down to it, there were 147 companies that owned all of those corporations. Okay. And then Forbes, the analysts from Forbes looked at those 147 companies and they said, well, if you know what's going on here, 10 banking firms own those 147 companies. And then some other independent analyst from Wall Street looked at those 10 banking firms and says, well, if you understand how big funds work, and one of them, for example, was Northwest Mutual, there are 4 big funds that are in control of those 10 banking houses. And those 4 funds are apparently owned, controlled, whatever you want to say, by approximately 150 men. Women need not apply. Now, I don't know. He sounded like he knew the names of these people. I don't know the names. And I think it's the people that we don't know their names are the most dangerous in this whole thing. So this is a fact. It's a pixel. You can take it to the bank for what it's worth. About 150 men control over 60% of the corporate wealth of the world. These people would fit into one room with lots of room left over. And somewhere in those 150 are the people that pull the levers. And I would say that when we look at the ultimate bad guys, the ultimate people bringing us this whole lockdown, centralization of power, what is this about? It's about centralization of power. And the lockdowns have caused small businesses to go out and big businesses to prosper. They want you in your house. They want you contained in a pen. And honestly, if you look at if they're looking at us like cattle, okay. Now, I don't think of my farmer as an evil guy because he periodically culls the herd and gives me some beef. I love it, but that's what's looking like. What are they doing to us? These are the uber lords. They're not even the elite. They are the super uber elite. There's only 150 of them, and I have a feeling that they're behind some of this or all of it. And what it looks to is happening now on the bottom, from my perspective, is we're being treated like cattle by somebody. And I'm looking at those 150, but maybe somebody else can figure this out. But from my perspective, they want to pen us in. What do you do to pen in the sheep? You make them afraid. They get themselves into the pen. So they want to lock us down, pen us in. They want to tell us what we can eat. They're buying up all the land so we can't independently farm. Warning came out from Nebraska by this farmer's wife or female farmer saying, don't sell your land. Don't sell your land. This is what it's about. They're going to just ruin the land.
Bringing down more regulation, like here in Colorado. They're going to regulate us out of farm. And then then Bill Gates talking about how we're not going to eat beef in the future. We're going to have artificial meat. Because he owns Impossible Burgers.
Made some of it from human cells, by the way. This is really it's kind of a spiritually nasty thing too, not just physically, but they're trying to tell us what we can eat. They've been doing that for a long time. Oh, they don't want you to have a big Pepsi. Now, I'm not saying Pepsi's health food, but you have the right to eat what you want. I'm sorry. You have the right to make bad decisions. Otherwise, you have no rights at all.
They're taking away menthol cigarettes now.
They wanted to stop this. They want to stop this. They want to stop, I'm trying to think of some of the dietary things. They tried to push on us all these bad fats, which caused us to die earlier. So we didn't become a drain on the Medicare rolls and things. So they call the herd, they tag us. Oh, by the way, they're going to vaccinate us and tag us with a vaccine that has, and for sure the Moderna has luciferase in it, which is a wandable tag. Okay. ID 2020. Don't say that's conspiracy. People can go look it up.
No, you can go quantum.tattoo. Bill Gates owns
tattoo.
that.
You got it. So they're tagging us, telling us what we can eat, putting us in a pen. I call that being a sheep or being a cow. I mean, that's what this acts like. The difference here is that we are thinking cows and we are thinking sheep. And although there's going to be 20% that will always listen to this authority and round themselves into the pen and go inside, the 80%, and it looks in America like we got an 80% of the herd that are rebelling and jumping over the fences. And that's enough to take our world back. And that's where we are with this.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear you say that because you're out on the road and you're talking to people and you're not a huge presence on social media with your own social media accounts. You're boots on the ground. You're out there. And so that's really encouraging to hear from you.
Yeah, I really do think so. I think people are waking up, and even the people that aren't completely awake, they're kind of going, well, I don't know. Something's going on here. They're getting, and I'm going to tell you, the magnitude of problems with this is what I tell people too. Okay, don't believe me. One of the tragedies, I think, is one of a whole family, some friends of ours, a whole family, they can shake their head and say they believe me. And then they all go out and get vaccinated to go on a trip. And I thought, their kids, themselves, nobody spared. I'm sick about it. Okay. Yeah. But so I tell people, even if you don't believe me, please wait a few months. Just think of it like a new car line. You wouldn't rush out and be the first guy on the new car that the brakes might not work, right? Just give us a few months, because this is such a bad thing. We're just starting to see, like in India, the deaths spiraling up, and those are vaccinated people. It started after the vaccinations. The Indians are getting it. They're stoning the vaccinators. These are not people that are listening to national news. They're just believing their eyes, and they're saying what's going on. And so we will be seeing the propaganda can only fool your eyes for so long. When it starts happening around you, I've had one friend die. I've had this family, who knows what's going to happen. I've had so many people come to me with this bleeding thing. It's got to be obvious to people in a few months. Yeah. So as this avalanche takes off,
we're seeing the acute cases, like acute reactions, right? Like somebody sent me a video yesterday. There was a gal who just like hit the floor after vaccination, hit the floor right there, seizure right there. But what's important too is that people need to understand that vaccine injury, it can come on later as well, right? Like we're seeing it rise in Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and things of that nature from childhood vaccinations and from like things like HPV and whatnot. We haven't seen those things, come up. It took years for that to happen. And so you shouldn't I feel like some people are like, well, I took it, I'm totally fine. Well, it's been 3 weeks.
Right. So what that tells you is you got past anaphylaxis. Yes. Anaphylaxis is that sudden, you take it, stop breathing, boom, you're down. And that can happen to any drug, any vaccine. Let's just be fair. Yep. But this one is 10 times more. At first they said it's up to 20 times more, but I think the numbers settled on 10 times more than all the other vaccines averaged out. So this is the worst one for anaphylaxis. And it's probably due to this part of this lipid nanoparticle stuff that they've coated the RNA with. It's not the RNA itself.
Is that the PEG?
Polyethylene glycol, that's one of them. Yeah. So that's phase 1 of death. Dr. Tenpenny gave a paid for seminar, but she had the 20 phases of death. I don't know if I can come up with 20, but here are my phases that I've been thinking about. One is the anaphylaxis. And then if you make it past the anaphylaxis, then there's the next step, which seems to be a variety of things. One of them is sudden cardiac death. Okay. How many people are we hearing about that just wake up dead? They're sitting in their chair. They had the vaccine 2 days ago and they just were found dead in their chair. Or they are heart attack at night. Friend of mine, heart attack at night, 60 some year old, but 68-year-old guys, they die of heart attack in bed. So it doesn't
15-year-olds don't.
It doesn't get worked out. Yes, and that's what we're seeing. But those are the numbers they're trying to take out of VAERS. They're trying to deny them and say, well, we've determined that wasn't really a vaccine industry, so we're going to take that out of VAERS. That's not the way they're by their own definition, that's not the way VAERS is supposed to work. It's supposed to keep everything in there so we can make sense of it. Okay, you start nitpicking and somebody taking stuff out, which I have a feeling if they're willing to do it overtly, how much are they taking out covertly? They control the database, and that's something we need to look at. Maybe we need an independent database they don't control.
Absolutely. It's a self-policing system, and it has been for the 30 years it's been in existence.
We need something they don't control. Yeah. So there's that. And then the next early phase, which happens within 2 weeks, are either severe neurologic problems with seizures that end in death, which that's not very common, but ascending paralysis, and that can end in death. The big one that I've been seeing are brain bleeds, GI bleeding, internal bleeding so massive that by the time they and this is usually within 4 days of the vaccine, and the thrombocytopenia. So there are a bunch of things that can happen acutely. And then then we get into these late phases. And I think that the next late phase is going to be this antibody-dependent enhancement, or this pathogenic priming is another word for it, where the point is your immune system is now artificially primed, okay? Instead of having exposure, the disease, immunity, now you are artificially primed as an artificial immunity against something, and it doesn't act like real nature and God's immune system for you, okay? Right. What it acts like is it when they gave it to you, it had a little codon section of this genomic material to depress your immune system just enough so you didn't chew up the RNA. Okay, so they admit that they put in an innate, they call it suppression of the innate immune system. That has to be part of your vaccination. Mm-hmm. But then beyond that, we don't know, what viruses might trigger this immune enhancement. It turns out flu actually did that. When we gave people the flu shot, the real statistic is if you get the flu, you're more apt to die from the flu. Now, it doesn't, again, then that's due to pathogenic priming. If you remember, there was a case, this kind of famous case of a 15-year-old in Niagara Falls who got the flu shot and then died of the flu. And it's ironic because they used him as a poster boy to get the flu shot, but in reality, he's probably a case of pathogenic priming, where he got a worse case of the disease had he not had the flu shot. Right. So that's going to happen later at an indeterminate period of time. Right. I will tell you another example of that possibly. This is all theoretical. This is just me thinking possibly. Mm-hmm. When you saw this come across China, you saw these young men. There were three groups. There was the big group of people that were well and walked away from it, or they got sick a little bit, or they were fine. And then you had the less than 1% of people who got very ill, went to the ICU and or died. Okay. And then there was an even smaller group of apparently healthy, thin young men. I saw one woman that this happened to, but mostly men walking down the street and doing a face plant. Yeah. And the couple pathologists snuck out, and maybe we talked about this, couple pathologists snuck out the findings that said they died of overwhelming sepsis and cardiac failure with COVID. Okay. Well, again, why would they be at risk? These are not the people that should be at risk for that. And this very dramatic sudden death is not how COVID was killing the other people. So right. Why them? They could have been military. And the reason I think it was mostly young men, I think they were probably the military, because we heard that in the SARS outbreak, after the SARS outbreak, the rumor was that although we only trialed vaccines on animals, they trialed it on humans. And so these could have been people that had the SARS vaccine back then that gave the animals the immune enhancement that died in their cages. These guys, SARS virus went away in nature, so they didn't get exposed to it until now. This is close enough to it. It dropped them like the animals. Yeah. Okay, so that could be what's going to happen in the fall when another round of something similar or flu. That's an unknown. I'm praying it doesn't happen. I hope we're exaggerating that issue, but we don't know. And I think we've already seen some cases. So I think it's possible and probable, but we don't know.
What is the flip side?
There are going to be the late issues. What's that?
What is the flip side? Like, we always think about when we're getting an injection that we're getting this artificial immunity, right? But what are we giving up in terms of
we're giving up your natural immunity? So that's the problem is, and especially with these, which gets me to my very latest thing. We don't know if this is going to give you autoimmune disease. One of the things we see with vaccine injury, the two big things in the payout of vaccine injury have been autoimmune disease and neurologic consequences. So what you're giving up is you don't know the future here. And so we don't know how many people are going to get autoimmune disease from this because of this. The way you get autoimmune disease naturally is RNA and DNA are out in your cells where it shouldn't be for longer periods of time than it should be. The RNA doesn't, we test for that. That's a simple lab test for single and double stranded DNA and RNA things. That's how they do these sophisticated tests for autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, scleroderma, lupus. Those are the kind of the classic ones. So we don't know about that. And then the last one is, and there's late term autoimmune neurologic diseases like amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. We have an example of that with the squalene that was put into the anthrax vaccine that damaged the Gulf War syndrome victims. And those guys coming back from the Gulf that took that vaccine had ALS at 4 times the background rate. This is a fatal neurologic disease. And it was caused by squalene, which is actually in the matrix adjuvant. Okay, it is in these vaccines. Now, the last one is we don't know, unlike all the other vaccine potential problems we've had in the past, we don't know what this is going to long-term do to your DNA. So there's a couple reasons to be worried about that. One is that if this is actually manufactured using embryonic stem cells or embryonic cells, as opposed to being made in chicken eggs somehow. And this is where I'm not 100% sure how they manufacture these things, but I know that when you have to keep something very cold, there's genetic material. And the question is, if it's one of the reasons that suddenly we have this big controversy over using aborted fetal tissue is not just about the moral principle in specific, but in general, the volume of tissue that's being harvested. Okay. And that kind of came on with these genetic vaccines. So the question is it being produced, which I think it is somehow, in embryonic tissue? And see, you're not a chicken. So if you get leftover chicken DNA from eggs that are used in the production of measles vaccine, it's not going to get into your DNA because you're not a chicken. You can recognize non-self, okay? But you don't recognize non-self if there's embryonic human DNA in that stuff, okay? So that's a potential of all these vaccines getting into you. The DNA, obviously DNA can intercalate into DNA. So we have retroviruses that do that kind of thing. And again, this is a little above my biologic education, but there are all these reverse transcriptases, all these enzymes that allow, we all carry viral DNA in our DNA, and it goes down generations. So keep in mind, if we're wrong about this and this stuff gets into your DNA, you'll pass it to your children and your grandchildren, So, and then the last thing is, and this I learned from Judy Mikovits, what people don't realize is that the RNA doesn't have to get into your DNA directly to affect it. It's an epigenetic controller of DNA. In other words, RNA apparently, and I didn't realize this because I don't think we knew it when I was in training, that RNA is produced as a template to your DNA to go out and make proteins. This is like, I tell people, this is like if you have a big factory you're going to build and you're the construction engineer that's in charge, and you now have carpenters and bricklayers and people that have to go out to all these parts of the factory and build parts of it. You don't give your master blueprint out to all of them and just hope they bring it back for the next guy, right? You make little copies of parts of that blueprint so it can go out and make the different parts of the factory. And that's how we run our body's system. Very brilliant. Our cell is like the DNA is that big master blueprint. You don't send it out to do things. You make messenger RNA. That's why we call it messenger. And it's made from a template. Your DNA opens up, I think, like a flower opening up, but the DNA is a 3-dimensional weird conformational thing, and it just unfolds itself in such a way so it presents the area that it wants copied. The mRNA is formed along that, and then it goes out and goes to these ribosomes and parts of the cell that then produce the protein. Right. But they only linger for a very short period of time. If they linger too long, you get autoimmune disease. Now, we've coded this synthetic RNA. First of all, it's not real, it's synthetic, but it's been coded in this lipid nanoparticle matrix in order to last longer. And we do not know how long it lasts. Right. So and it goes on and on. So that goes to the end of your life. We don't know. Are these programmed? Unfortunately.
And will they transmit for the rest of their life?
Well, and that's it. So this is why I think anybody with any symptoms of transmission needs to get some treatment. I don't want to think that I'm going to get something given to me that is going to now become part of my genome. I don't want that. That's the scariest part about this. And we just don't know. We just do not know.
And so we get all these questions, what do I do if I'm around people who are vaccinated? Should I be this presents just such I know. Opens up a huge can, right? Can I kiss someone that's been vaccinated?
I know. Somebody said we're going to have dating services of the unvaccinated.
Yes.
We're going to have medical practices for the unvaccinated. We're going to have schools for it could be a separate society, but not the way we thought. Right. Do you date? This somebody had this up on the web, and I thought this was a good thought problem. If given the fact you've taken a genetic agent that may, in fact, long-term affect your DNA and go on to your descendants, do you marry somebody that's taken the vaccine? And if you're not going to, are you going to date somebody that's going to take a vaccine? So they weren't joking about having a vaccine-free website for dating. But then again,
I totally
now we have this whole shedding. Are we safe even if we don't take the vaccine? You see, I don't think they want any of us to go without this vaccine for some reason.
Right.
And
I think that's the goal. That's the goal.
I think that is the goal. And I've heard from other doctors that this is damaging sperm viability and it's damaging embryo viability of eggs made from mothers. You know, it's a reproductive. And I heard Dr. Northrup say this. She said, and she's a very famous OBGYN doctor, and she said, you know,
she was on here last week.
Oh yeah, well, she's excellent, and so she could clarify this much better than I could. But she said, and this is the part that stuck with me, and I think this would stick with any layperson, that regular menstrual periods in young women it's a sign of health, of reproductive health, and when something screws that up, there's something going wrong with your reproductive health. So all these young women that are having yes. So the issue, I would say, so I have some thoughts on this on my website, and I continue to clarify this all the time. So it's changing. You can go back, but it's themedicalrebel.com. It's 3 words, themedicalrebel.com. And what I've tried to do is say what I would do. I can't give medical advice. I'm not giving anybody medical advice to what you do. I'm telling you what I know and what I want my family and me, what I think about doing for my health, myself, my husband, my kids. You know, where do they, because I have 2 boys, I'd like to have grandchildren someday, and they're not married yet. So I don't want them to go out and completely kill their ability to have grandchildren. I mean, it's an unknown, people. I just can't emphasize that enough. We don't know. And it gets to, and I'll tell you why. Another thing, you're talking about people just don't want to believe this. I'll tell you why too. And I think this is at the heart of this whole thing. And I would recommend, I want to say, I learned a little about psychopathology in medical school when you had to do psychiatry stuff, but psychiatrists and orthopedic surgeons were kind of on the opposite end of the medical spectrum. You know, we don't like to talk to our patients. That's the joke. And they don't like to examine their patients. That's the joke. So, but I'll tell you what, there's a guy named Mark Passio, and he has an excellent, you may have had him. He's also one of my heroes for putting out about psychopaths, because you listen to him on I think it's called Having the Psychopath, but he has several things on what psychopathology really is, and he explains it in a very clear and compelling way. So I'm not trying to plagiarize him, but I use his information because what he points out, and I knew part of this, okay, and I've also learned this from some books I've read, but we are not being told about psychopathology by the media, by the FBI stories, by what we think. We've been misled purposely. You know, reality is not here. It's actually over here. But that's because we've been told a bunch of stuff that gets us to look over here because they want us to. They don't want us to look straight ahead and realize what's going on. And the issue is, who is they? Let's answer who they is. And I believe this is true, that 4 to 10% of the world are psychopaths. And psychopaths are not like us. They do not have the biggest, they are completely self-absorbed. So they do things for their own benefit. And they don't care if they run over your back, even murder other people to get what they want. Now, the misunderstanding that people have, and by the way, they'll always justify their actions. They never feel remorse. And what he taught me is you cannot stop a psychopath with any amount of reasoning. They have to be physically, forcibly stopped. And that's important here when we talk about our ultimate winning strategy. Right. That what here's the point is that the media, and I read this, and I learned this from a book on serial killers. And why I read this, I don't know. It's just something I saw in a bookstore and was on an airplane or something, thought it'd be interesting. But it's really eye-opening, because what he did is he went down and he looked at all these people like Son of Sam, Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, you know, the Green River, whatever, all those different killers. And then he points out that it is not true what the FBI shows tell you, that these are all lone wolves. Right. They always make them into lone wolves, that they just were creepy kind of guys that lived in there.
It's like the attackers jump up from behind a bush. That's so rare.
And most psychopaths are not the creepy Jeffrey Dahmers. They're people that look like you and me. They're in positions of power because they like to have power over people. they can recognize each other and they will coordinate their activities to benefit themselves as a group, but they do not have any empathy to us.
Right.
They see us like cattle.
Mm-hmm.
They do not see us as themselves. And so they don't have remorse when they take us out.
Yeah,
Once
I'm glad
we
you're covering
understand
that because people can't
Yeah.
understand why. Why
Right,
would they do that? That's always
why
the
would they
question.
do that?
Why would
Why
they
would
do that?
anybody want to kill children?
Bill Gates does not see himself as one of us. He sees
No.
himself as a completely different higher species.
Right. They're smarter and they deserve to be in charge.
Absolutely.
So I heard a psychiatrist say this, that this psychopaths, and keep in mind, there are more psychopaths in the world than there are left-handed people. So this is not, think about it. I mean, you know, it's an interesting point.
Yeah.
So and they tend to be very smart. They tend to be very erudite, that they can, and very good with manipulating people through words.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I met Senator McCain. He was my senator one time, and he literally came to my house when I lived in Arizona for a fundraiser. Okay. Mm-hmm. And when he looked you in the eye, when he was talking to you, you would think that you were the most important person in the world to that guy. He was so charming and could speak so well, but he is your psychopath. He didn't care a whit about people. He would yell and scream at his staff. He was a really nasty guy to other people. And I think it goes even deeper than that, but at least we know that from the reports coming out of his office at the time. Right. And I'm not trying to speak ill of the dead per se, but I think that we need to recognize that there are people among us and they tend to gravitate to politics and they see the world differently. And as a psychiatric person told me one time, it's almost like we have an alien species that looks like us, talks like us, walks like us, and really aren't us. And they live among us and they hurt us in ways that we don't always recognize. Now, there are compensated in psychiatry. We talk about compensated psychopaths, and we've probably known some. There are people that you would not pick up because from an early age, all psychopaths learn how to fit into human society by faking what they need to do. Like grandma dies, you're in second grade, and you've learned that you're supposed to cry. Yeah, you're supposed to cry and go to the funeral and be sad. You know, don't be. And so they learn early on how to imitate human behavior, but they're not acting. They don't have all of the empathy and what it takes to be human. They're missing something there, whatever that is. And so that's really an issue. And so when you say, well, and so we as human beings, we as fully competent human beings that are not psychopaths, we project our moral limitations and our goodness and our care for other people onto everybody we meet. Yeah. So we can't believe that Bill Gates doesn't care about us as human beings.
Yeah.
Why would
you can't understand a psychopath when you're not a psychopath?
You can't understand this. And where do these people gravitate? Let me just point out, they gravitate to positions of power because they tend to be very smart people. The ones that are compensated are very, very smart people. And they might not kill you by going out and eating you like Jeffrey Dahmer, but they might kill you by fighting wars in the Middle East. You know, they go to politics. They go to the top level of our police force, our judiciary, our military. They can be surgeons. They're overrepresented in the surgery department in medicine.
Interesting.
When I was in the Navy, I was at the submarine base and I was talking to the psychologist who used to do screening for the guys that would go out on the fleet ballistic missile subs. So these are guys that are 3 months under the Arctic ice cap. They don't want somebody to freak out. And this is what he told me. He said, you know, and the term sociopath or psychopath is basically interchangeable, the two words you hear. He told me, he said, you know, we can screen out for the person that's claustrophobic. We can screen out for the person that's, you know, just kind of crazy anxiety, you know, doesn't like to be around other people but we cannot screen out the true psychopath because they are so committed to their own beliefs. I mean, they don't, and they're very, very, that you can't screen them out with any of the tests,
exactly what to say.
Including lie detector tests, probably, because I think they used everything. But that's what we're dealing with when we ask who's doing this. And I would contend, and I think that I like what David Icke said one time at a Trafalgar Square rally. He said, you know, the people that are running this show probably could fit into one room. There are 7.8 billion of us. I think I see a way out of this.
Yes.
But but to do that, you have to realize, we as human beings that are normal have to realize at every level of we have been controlled for decades, generations, thousands of years, probably at every level of humanity. There are these people that exercise control over you and are doing bad things as a result to human society because they just want their own control mechanism. This is where tyranny comes from. And I have there's a mathematician that wrote a very good article called The Psychopathy of Totalitarianism. I recommend everybody read that. It's a little arcane writing, but it's about that you have, that they create these false realities. They live in this kind of bubble to make this come about, and that you have to understand who you're fighting, and that you have to, at some point, you cannot just talk them away. You're not going to convince them that this is wrong. What you have to do is say no and not participate. They cannot rein in 7.8 billion cattle.
Right. I think part of the problem too is that some people, the normal people population, they've done pretty well in this system.
Yes.
They get a lot of accolades because they've performed well through our education system. They've gotten awards for their performance. They get these little tidbits. They don't want to let go of the system.
Right. But, a friend of mine said to me this, because I was telling him this about psychopathology, and that they tend to rise to the top levels of captains of industry, as well as politics and medicine and all sorts of the judiciary, wherever it takes a lot of brain power. They tend to be very smart people and competent with words. So they tend to rise to the top. Yeah. And he said that's very interesting because he's an IT guy and he does IT management kind of stuff. So he doesn't just do the typing on the keyboard. He manages the groups of people that do program projects. And so he said, no matter how well I take care of my people, no matter how many times I, give up extra time, work hard, do all these things, I can only rise to a certain level in the corporation. And he said, and when you get above that level and you meet those guys above that level, they're a little bit dead-eyed. They're they're not the same. And I think there is a certain amount of that. And that's the problem we're facing, is that we are all being somewhat victimized by it. Mm-hmm. We don't always recognize it.
And it would appear that some people enjoy being victimized.
Well, there's always going to be them. It's the sadist and the masochist. I mean, we are always going to have people that, for whatever reason, but that's probably because they grew up being victimized, unfortunately. Right. We'd like to see that system go away too. I'd like to see a system where children are raised without being victims as small children, so they're not victims as adults. Right. But you're not going to save everybody from that, but you can take down the system that victimizes them. So, everybody will do better. Yeah. And in this situation, once I think we realized, that's when the mask thing really got my attention. The hydroxychloroquine thing really got my attention. But this vaccine program, it does fit all the criteria for a war against humanity, especially if you think this is a sterilization procedure. That it may not sterilize everybody, but it's going to sterilize a bunch. And, if you look at also Hollywood, they say Hollywood always tells you what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Look at the movies that have talked about this, and
TV shows,
The Handmaid's Tale. Yeah. And there was a little blip that was on Telegram. It was like almost an old black and white thing, but it was about a vaccine program to sterilize. There are too many of us and we have to sterilize a certain number. And they're kind of out talking about this. I also have a friend who said that and it's actually a friend, this other doctor, she has friends at high levels and who go to these, it said, when you're around a bunch of these really rich liberal people that are kind of the more left-wing liberal, we would call establishment. Mm-hmm. One of the things they always talk about is depopulation. Is a need for gently reducing the population of the world. The population control is the big problem. Mm-hmm.
I recently saw an ad in Vancouver, British Columbia, on a bus shelter that said the best thing you can do for your child is not have another one. I
know.
What is that? I mean, this stuff is right in our face.
Right. It is right in our face. Right. Now, at some point, there's a point to what they're saying, but it's not but the problem is it can't be done by the Politburo answer. There's a right way to farm. Okay. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't involve a Politburo deciding how many tractors you should have.
Right.
The problem with this program of eugenics and population control, it's never left to the family.
Right.
A family that can't support another child might decide not to have another child.
Yeah.
In other words, nature kind of works this out.
Yes.
But if those 150 guys that decide who's going to have children, like the China one, look at how well the China one child policy has worked out. Yes, they've gotten their population growth slowed down, but they don't have enough women. And now they have a whole bunch of single young men with no chance of getting married. That's the stuff of revolutions and wars. Okay. That is not a good thing for China. And that's a major demographic problem they go into this century, this millennium with. And that's just because, again, a few people at the top can't run the whole show. And that's even if, you know, I mean, that's in general the problem with anything. And it's a problem with medicine. You can't have a few people at the top, whether it's, I don't care how bright they are, running it. It doesn't work well that way. You need distributional brain power. That's what's brought us out of poverty. That's what's made the world better in the ways it's become better, is because individuals have created things.
Right. What you talked about in one of your talks that I just watched recently off your website, which was so good, you gave kind of this example about the Ford Motor Company. And
and King Harold of Norway, neither of which I want to say have anything to do with the takedown.
Right. But if you could just go over that briefly, I thought that was such a powerful way of explaining how this happens, because I think if we can penetrate that disbelief in people, you know, how is this? That would be great.
Well, and here was my point. My point is, and it works better by metaphor, because it is kind of, you got to look at the picture here. Okay, so America, we have a powerful military, but let's suppose a small country like Norway decides it's going to take us over. They want our land, and they decide they want to take us down. And the first thing they have to do is to take control of the country. And how are they going to do it? Well, they can't land. They have a very competent military in Norway, but it's small. They can't land on the beaches of California or Virginia and think they're going to do anything. So they decide to take us out from within. So what they do, King Harold takes all his money and his sources, and he doesn't buy Ford Motor Company. He just buys the leadership. So he bribes people. He gives them grants. He tells them that he's all into their product, and he gives them all this money. So now they're all beholden to him. And then he suggests to them that he wants them to start making short-range nuclear missiles, not so many cars. Well, now they're used to getting this money grab from him. So they're okay. They start making these missiles. And he then embeds, which is also what has happened here, he embeds 200 of his engineers into the Ford Motor Company to start designing these short-range nuclear missiles and how they're going to transport and do all the work. So this happens. Okay. Now, after a while, they don't have enough cars to get to all their dealers, and their dealers around the country for Ford start suffering. And so no problem. King Harold funds Ford. So nothing looks like it comes from him. He funds Ford, and Ford funds all these car dealers for doing little busy work that really doesn't matter, like some kind of research program on how Fords are marketed or whatever. And they get lots of money for it. So they're happy, and they don't care they're not selling so many cars. Okay. And then one day, all this has come to fruition. They've got the nuclear missiles. They put them in armored carriers, and they call up all these dealers that are now beholding to the Ford Motor Company. So the Ford guys call them up and say, well, it's time for you to take a shipment. Now, these things are going to be short-range nuclear missiles. Just put them on your back lot. We'll tell you what to do with them later. Okay. And that's, and why this wouldn't happen is two reasons. One is, I think we're very competent at watching fissionable material move within the states. So we always are paying attention. We've got technology to look at that. But the other reason is somebody would squeal. They would recognize that these missiles are an act of war. There's no other reason for a short-range nuclear missile. It's an act of war. And so the word would get out. Our military would shut this down somehow. But this is exactly what happened to America with this vaccine program, with this COVID war. What happened is that big funds, such as the Gates Fund, but it's not the only one. Other funds clandestinely funded the Gates Foundation that then funded the NIH. And Tony Fauci, his role in this, he's what the mafia would call the bag man. He's the guy that took all the money, took $800 billion, over $500 billion just for AIDS. And he took all this research grant money from these people, and he doled it out to hospitals so that they all became dependent on his money. Mm-hmm. So when he said, hey, don't give them, don't talk about hydroxychloroquine. Hydroxychloroquine doesn't work. Here's the facts. Don't listen to the anything else, and make sure. And I'm going to give you the new remdesivir trial, because that's going to get us going here. And remdesivir is the way to go. And we're going to do that. Now, there's another point to that, is that there's a purchasing organizations. These group purchasing organizations were also, I don't know how they got funded, but they're part of this too, where they control the smaller hospitals. Yep. So you got the big hospitals, the small hospitals, and then Obamacare comes in and they make sure that all the doctors are working for the hospitals so they can't be independent voices. We knew it when that was happening, but nobody would listen to AEPS and the rest of us saying that. So that's what
lose your hospital privileges.
Right. And nobody recognized that when there were 200 scientists embedded into Moderna and Pfizer working on vaccines, nobody recognized that as a problem. Nobody recognized on vaccine programs being self-disseminating as a problem. They didn't recognize this as an act of war against our people potentially. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's how we came to be exactly where we are now. It's the same principle. An outside evil or foreign actor or agent, and it doesn't have to be outside like a nation state in that case. This could be the globalists. It could be the cabal. There are lots of names that come out about whoever's running this show, but whoever's running it, they come and they fund through these intermediates, so their names never show up.
That's right.
The big fund owners don't show up here. They're funding through Bill Gates into the NIH, and the NIH does this. Now, as a pop question, I ask people, who's the director of the NIH? And most people cannot tell me. It's Francis Collins. He's a geneticist. And I will tell you, there's a great picture on the National File has an article about this, and it shows a picture. And you'll know the picture when you get to it. It's a picture. I have it on a talk somewhere, but it's a picture of three people. There's Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, and Francis Collins. And so Bill Gates and Francis Collins are sitting next to each other, literally shoulder to shoulder on one end of this table, like they're giving a news conference, right? Mm-hmm. And they're looking out with this dead-eye stare. I mean, if you want to look at what I think of a psychopathology,
that's the poster for it.
On the other end of the table, there's Anthony Fauci, who himself may not be a psychopath, but he's a bought man.
Yeah,
he's the bag man for the mob, mm-hmm. and he goes out. And the capos, you're asking about, there's so many people involved in the system. So Fauci owns all these administrative heads of all these big universities that are dependent on him for research grants, right? Mm-hmm. And they may not be psychopaths, all of them. Some of them could be. There's 4 to 10% in the world, but they might be perfectly normal, but they're like the capos. They've been paid, okay? And they've been paid very well to do the bidding of the NIH.
Yeah.
And, just like the mob analogy, what happens when you go against the mob boss? You get your money jerked back, and you might get your legs broken.
Yeah.
And by the way, worse. I'm not suicidal, and I know that if anything happens to me, because I'm saying dangerous things against the pharmaceutical industry. Yeah. But the point is, the pharmaceutical industry funds a lot in this too. So, but you see Tony Fauci, he's sitting there at the other end of the table, and he's kind of like this, and he's kind of looking at these guys like, oh God, what else are you going to tell me to do that I have to put up with? Because, remember at first, here's a perfect example, the masks, okay?
Yeah.
Tony Fauci knows about masks. He's not a dumb guy.
He wrote a paper on it.
These guys are not dumb. They've been wrong about everything because they're not being wrong. They're being told to do the wrong things purposely, okay? Mm-hmm. So at first he spouted out, now keep in mind, masks are only for medical people. They're not perfect even for them, but they should wear them and maybe it will help, but you don't need to wear them. They won't work in the community. He knows that. And the actual CDC trial on influenza showed it doesn't even stop influenza in the community. Masks, hand washing, and disinfecting your environment doesn't work. So he knows that. So he said the right thing at first, and then he immediately said, "Oh no, wait, no, masks are important. Everybody should wear them." Yeah. And then he said, well, every once in a while, I think his honesty kind of creeps out and he says, yeah. And he says, well, actually, masks are just to keep your face off your hands, as if that's kind of getting him out of this whole moral quagmire. Yeah. No, Dr. Fauci, I think it's immoral to force people to be mandated to have a mask to keep your face off your hands. And then what did he say? He said, then an article came out and it was in the New England Journal about it's just a talisman. It may not even work for medical personnel, but it makes them feel safer. Mm-hmm. But he kept changing his.
Then 2 masks.
Then we had to have multiple masks, right? And then and that was wrong. No, we can go back to one mask. It's just, and then you take the vaccine because then you get rid of the mask. Oh, wait, no, vaccines won't you still got to social distance.
I know, they're making him look like a fool. And now it would seem as though they're going to sell him down the river because they're.
Oh, of course he is.
Yeah, they're really coming out now about his involvement in the Wuhan lab.
Oh, of course. Now, let's just think about this. and he didn't learn lessons from World War II. What happened to the SA, the brown shirts?
Yeah.
As soon as Hitler got into power and didn't need them being rabble rousers on the street anymore, they served their purpose. They got murdered.
Yeah.
Okay. You always take out. Who did Stalin take out? You know, Dzerzhinsky and all the guys. He took out the guys that put him into power. So I could have told Tony Fauci this a long time ago. You're going to be the first to go, and there are going to be others like you. People that can. Frank Plummer up in Winnipeg suddenly died in February 4th because he was at the heart of this. He could have told a lot about where this thing came from, why he hired Dr. Z or who hired Dr. Z to work in his lab. But he died really. Carrie Mullins died.
Yes.
Jeffrey Epstein might be part of this, reason that he went. I mean, we don't know, but there's a lot of people dead around this. And, but Tony Fauci, I think you're right. His days are numbered, but he was being confusing was part of his job, because when you if you put people, you make people afraid, you put them, this is just psychological techniques of control people, put them in lockdown, you monopolize their perception with nonstop death numbers from the mainstream media telling you how it's going to kill everybody, even though it was 99.9 some percent survivable. Then you add confusion. When you add confusion, you get the Stockholm syndrome. People become so anxious, they will do anything to get out of their anxiety. And now what they're doing is, you do what they say. This is also the way it works in captivity. You do what they say, they move the goalpost.
Yes. You
got the vaccine, you still got to wear the mask. Okay. They're going to move the goalpost. You want to travel, you got the vaccine. Well, you can travel now, but now they're saying you're going to have it every 6 months. Yep. Or maybe you're going to have it every time. I heard somebody say you might have to have this every time you get on a plane. Wow. So it keeps.
I know that 3 boosters are in the works already.
Right.
I mean, you're going to be beholden to this vaccine passport system. You're going to have to keep this thing upgraded all the time. So whenever they choose, the cases are up, we're going to give you another dose, you're going to have to run down and get it. Is that the way you want to live your life?
Right. And let's think about this. Let's say it was just about money. Wouldn't it be great if I gave you an addictive vaccine? And by that, I mean a vaccine that so damaged your immune system, you couldn't live without further vaccines.
In my opinion, I feel that that's what they're doing.
I mean, that could be part of it.
Yeah,
that could be part of it. That now we let a few more people die from in the fall, and they're going to tell you whether it's true or not. By the way, they don't even have to make it. They don't even have to do that. They just have to make you convinced that it's that you need more vaccines, not fewer, and you'll run out and get the next thing. Even though look what's happening in India. India, the death count was almost 0 from COVID. It was way down. And
they were giving out ivermectin and HCQ.
Right. They were treating things right with hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin. They prophylaxed household contacts. They really were doing well. They had less than half of the deaths that we did. Okay. And they have 1.3 billion people. So with 4 times the people, less than half the deaths. So they were doing things right. Yeah. But then the death numbers are coming down. They can't social distance. No. And it's, come on now.
Yep.
Now they're vaccinating, and the vaccine and the death rate's starting to go up. And what are we hearing? Oh, it's a variant.
There's bodies in the street. Everyone's
dying. A variant. It's another variant. Get more vaccines. We've got to change to a new vaccine or something. Again, it's a false fear. Now, I mean, how clever. They produce the death to make people afraid to take more vaccines to have more death.
Yeah.
It sure seems like it. This is the death cult. I've heard it called that there is a death cult in this world. It may be true.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it gets too creepy the further you go, but
I agree.
I can tell you what I absolutely know. And that is that this vaccine has the worst statistics of anything. It's not a vaccine, and it has total unknowns, and it's the worst rollout statistics, death and damage that we've ever seen, and yet they continue to push forward and double down.
Yeah.
That's an absolute given.
I know you're not giving medical advice here, but just you personally, what are you doing, and what would you do if you haven't taken the vaccine?
If I'd taken the vaccine.
Yeah. What would you do if you'd taken it, and what are you doing for yourself that you haven't?
Well, and again, it's on the website, but the answer to both of those is the same in some regards. So the first part to say is that the healthiest people that get over this and that have a good antiviral immune system, they They don't overeat. They live in what I call the anti-inflammatory lifestyle. And it's not always obvious. A lot of people think that the gluten-free diet is a bunch of hoo-hoo, but gluten, all these things are highly inflammatory. So a gluten-free diet, gluten, barley, kamut, spelt. I don't even know what spelt is in, but anyway, they say those are the 4 things to give up, and absolutely without cheating on that. Okay, that's number 1 that I do. The second thing I do is avoid the bad oils, and we just mentioned that, the coke, avoid any man-made oils. The third thing is, if I'm in the only time I really feel like I'm in a high risk environment right now, and this is work in progress. Do we prophylax people that have not had the vaccine and are normal and we don't know what to do? I'm not risk at getting pregnant. I'm not going to have children. I've had my children. So that puts me in a little different category. Those people that are pregnant, I think they should really avoid vaccinated people until we know what's going on. It doesn't seem to get people going down to the grocery store, because we've all been around that. It's when somebody close to you gets vaccinated, it seems to be. You have to have some time with them. That's what it seems to be. So if I were pregnant, I would do that. And your children, you're going to send them back to school with all these vaccinated kids? I don't know. See, that's I homeschooled my children for a while, and I know it's pretty darn easy to do, and they get a great education. So I think I would, especially with the computers coming in, it's not a big, I was the lowest paid spine surgeon in the world because I chose to stay home and educate and take care of my kids. And I think it's time for other people to do that. But so there's that. And then I don't prophylax myself except in one situation. If I'm going to be on an airplane, how many people, let's forget COVID for a second, just in general, over the years, when you travel, when do you get sick?
Yeah.
I always get sick on cruise ships, not when I'm there, but by the time I get off, I've picked up something, and it's either my husband or me. One of us gets, really gets sick with something. And so that tends to happen. So if I'm going to be on a confined environment, like an airplane for 5 hours or something, I take 2 hydroxychloroquine before I leave the next day. And then I take, if maybe in 4 days, I might take another one. It's, you can buy, again, you can get this stuff. You don't need a doctor to do this. We shouldn't need a doctor, period. In Uganda, which has the lowest death rate in the world, you can go and just buy this stuff over the counter. Why can't we? We think we're free Americans. No, we are cattle. Okay. Because we can't buy our own.
Because everything's monetized.
They choose for us. So we should, and by the way, governors can make it over the counter in their states. You, governor, wherever you are, that's a legal thing to do. So you should go do it. So that's, by the way, then that governor, the first governor to do that would be a hero to the republic. Okay. Just like the governor of Florida is getting all this press from opening up his state. Any of you governors out there listening, you could be a hero. You could be the new political superstar by just making it over the counter. Okay. And don't let your medical people talk you out of this as being dangerous. That is just nonsense. We've had billions of doses and millions of people, and pregnant women and everybody, over 70 years. It actually was used for cardiac problems at one time in an experiment, found to be very useful. But then they shut that up. So that's my prophylaxis regimen right now.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's perfect, but that's what I would do. Now, the issue is if you've taken the vaccine, again, you definitely live the anti-inflammatory lifestyle. Get your extra weight off because you don't, do everything, good exercise, clean water. Don't get exposed to fluoride. Don't get exposed to heavy metals. Please do not take a flu vaccine. That could trigger it. We don't know about these other vaccines. Don't think, I've had a lot of older people that took the first one, then had the vaccine remorse and said, but should I take the second one?
5 million people,
I want to ask them, why would you ever think you want to take the second one if you're worried about having taken the first one now that you know what you know? Well, I think the answer is there's some magical thinking going on that somehow that you're meant to get 2. And if you only get 1, it's more dangerous than if you get the 2. And I don't think that's the case. Yeah. So, don't double down on a bad thing, in my opinion, but that's just me. The other thing I would say is, again, everybody should have some hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin in their house. They can get it offline. Themedicalrebel.com. I don't sell this stuff. I just tell you where to go. I don't have actually the links to any particular overseas pharmacies, but I can tell you that lots of people are using them. And if you're worried about getting overseas drugs, just keep in mind that for the last decade, we've been having overseas drugs all the time. They were from China. And there was no FDA oversight. So the FDA is a joke at this point. And that's another thing we should recognize. It's been a joke for a long time. They don't make you safer. They just make drugs more expensive. And they're part of the takedown here. They're part of the thing. Did you notice that they've now authorized to get children vaccinated.
Yes.
They've decided that they've approved I guess as an experiment, but I don't think they've approved it without experimental status, but they've approved now for children to be vaccinated. Well, that alone tells you the moral cesspool they live in.
Yeah.
You know, vaccinating our children is wrong in any world. Even if you want to argue about adults, it's wrong in any world to do this child thing.
Yeah.
So that's what I would do. And the other thing is I really, regardless of what the Institute of Medicine and the newspapers tell you, supplements matter. They don't just matter to this. I actually, for a long time, far preceding COVID, I have had the 9 supplements everybody should take on my website. And now I put it up on the medicalrebel.com, just as long as my other website. But it's just basically like iodine. Okay. Yeah. Iodine, everybody should take iodine, especially those of us in the Midwest. We live in the goiter belt. So when the Institute of Medicine and these you know, doctors say, oh, vitamins just give you expensive urine, that's a really neat talking point. That's just not true. And they know it's not true. They give vitamin B12 shots, right?
I know.
That's a vitamin. Okay. Vitamin D, by the way, isn't a vitamin. It's a hormone. And we know we give hormone supplementation. We can give hormone replacement therapy. Come on, guys. So we know they do it too. This is just a takedown strategy. Don't listen to them. And like iodine, we were the goiter belt because we don't eat a lot of fish and seaweed like the Japanese. So I take the Japanese dose of iodine, for example, and I will tell you that it's been shown now that it really makes a difference to like fibrocystic breast disease. One of the problems is that after World War II, one of the reasons not to eat wheat is not just the gluten. It's the fact that wheat is contaminated with glyphosate and bromine. They stabilize it with bromine. And bromine is, before World War II, they used to stabilize wheat with iodine, which is a great thing to do.
Yes.
Why, after World War II, did they decide to go to bromine? Yeah. Why? Why would you do that?
Some lobbyist somewhere for bromine went in and said,
or it's the German chemists that came over with a paperclip project. I'm just going to say, who knows? Yeah. But the bottom line is, it was a bad thing to do after World War II. And bromine damages the ability of your thyroid to take up the iodine it needs. It damages your ability to absorb iodine. So it's a bad halide. We don't want to have bromine. It's like fluoride. You don't want to have fluoride. Ironically, you know, my dad was one of the original inventors of fluoride. He was the original, probably inventor of fluoride toothpaste. He was one of the first people to his original research, which I have a whole library full of his writings, were on how teeth calcify. And in World War II, after World War II, and they used that data and the idea was, well, that fluorides may help teeth caries. Let's put it in toothpaste. And that's what he did, but he didn't patent it. So, you know, on the other hand, I'm still having to work for a living. On the other hand, I feel more, but he in my little town, he was the one in 1956 or 55 that when nobody had heard about it, he suggested that they fluoridate the water. And now I'm in a weird position of trying to get them to unfluoridate the water because it's turning out that's a really bad program. And it's never been proven it makes a difference to cavities. In fact, they actually looked at that fairly recently and it did not in demographically similar towns.
What a great example, though, of how science isn't static.
No, it's
right.
Not
like your dad wasn't a bad man. He was doing what he thought was right. He studied, he went over the research, and that's what his conclusion was.
And the problem is they did not understand back then the difference, or at least he didn't, I think, the difference between inorganic fluoride, which is what we put into our water supply, and organic fluoride. Right. Organic fluorides are not as toxic, and they're different. They're different things. And what he had done, in fact, he was famous because people said he could tell people where they lived in the country by looking at their teeth, because certain areas had natural fluorides, but they were at the right exact amount, etc. But that's how that whole thing started. It was looking at natural organic fluorides. But inorganic fluoride that we use in our water supply is a toxic effluent from the aluminum processing.
Right.
Aluminum, by the way, is key to something that they want us to have, which is really bad for us also. The aluminum in the vaccines is an adjuvant. Aluminum
heavy metal
into the air. That's the government has admitted to.
Yeah.
What's that?
They don't recognize that heavy metal detoxing is effective, right?
Right.
It's just gaslit completely over. And if you're a physician or a researcher that even suggests that heavy metals could be,
Right. And again, I used to think that. I used to think anti-vaxxers were crazy. The difference is I've looked at the data now. I've looked at the stuff myself.
Yeah.
And
the same with Dr. Tenpenny, Right. And same with Robert Kennedy Jr.
Yes, God love him for standing up,
Yes.
and those people have done a really good job taking the legal fight to them. And they got, by the way, they got the CDC to admit that autism was an issue. But now they can't enforce what they took him to court for. They've put it back on their website because, and it's the same thing, like the AAPS, I believe, took the Medicare to court. Somebody took the Medicare to court and won at I think a Supreme Court level that you cannot patent. You cannot copyright the CPT codes that all doctors have to use to bill Medicare, right? It's a huge book. You spend a lot of money every year in your medical office, or the hospitals do, to buy all these computer things from the AMA and all these books from the AMA to get the codes to make billing. But see, that's code required by federal law. So you can't patent that or copyright it, but that's how the AMA makes their money. So they won the judgment, but they cannot enforce it because they continue to do it. And even after having the law against them. So this is one of the other problems. And this is what I say when I say it's not going to, the solution to our problem with what's happening to us with the viral takedown, with the psychological operation, with the vaccines, with all these things that are happening to us. Ultimately, the law can do some things maybe, but not very much. It's going to come down to us first doing passive resistance. And that's like, what do you do when your school is going to insist on masks even now?
Yeah, don't comply.
Yes, the first thing is you can do, is simple and easy, is get your friends and you to not comply, because schools get money from the government and they're going to start noticing if 30 people or 40 people in a class of 100 don't show up. You got to get enough numbers. They won't do it just for you, but if you get your friends involved and you realize there's no end in sight here, if you accede to this, and how bad it is for your kids, how many people have their kids. I mean, you're really hurting the kids with these masks. So that's one thing. You can go to the school board, but school boards have been emasculated.
Yep.
You can stage protests. You can do whatever you want. The ultimate is just non-compliance. And that's going to have to be the vaccine. I don't know if you saw, and I don't know if it's real, but I hope it's pretty, even if it's not real, it's true in the humor. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's real, but it's an announcer saying, he's talking about on some program, talking about how the vaccine program is slowing down because they have more vaccine now than they have people wanting to take. Yes. And then he misspoke and he said, take this euthanasia. And he said this vaccination. That was like a Freudian slip.
Yeah, well, here in Colorado, the vaccination site, someone filmed it. They had cones set up. They were expecting the masses, and it was dead. There was nobody there. So
let it die on the vine. Let them spend all this money and ship it out.
But they're going to be pushing hard. I mean, they've rolled in mobile vaccine units to schools here. They are hitting it hard. But it's up to us to stand firm in our position and just bind together in civil noncompliance. Right,
and that's what I remember at the GOP meeting when they asked the sheriff. Somebody asked the sheriff, the person running for being sheriff, who subsequently won in our county, asked him if he would come and take weapons. Are you going to, or if the federal government says you have to confiscate weapons, are you going to do it? And he said no. Yeah. And so finally I said, okay, I'm going to raise my hand. I raised my hand. I said, are you going to allow forced vaccination?
Yeah.
No. Well, we'll see. He said no. We'll see.
Yeah.
Again, see that one of the reasons they're doing it this way, and they're not doing it with short range too. They're not doing it with disarming us and a physical takedown. Like that's my Norway analogy. Is that people that would recognize guns and missiles and things as acts of war and weaponry, they don't recognize vaccines and medicines as acts of war and weaponry. So it sneaks in under the wire as a safety precaution run by public health officials. How can you argue with public health officials? They're the experts. So we had a county of 14,000 people with a mask mandate where nobody outside the nursing home was dying of COVID, except maybe one or two people. But that's not, it just doesn't make sense. Right. And it didn't matter because most people still didn't wear a mask, and it doesn't
do anything.
It didn't do anything. Okay. And I think they finally recognized it. So now it's come to be out. But in the process, like in Omaha, you had policemen going out enforcing mask mandates.
Yeah.
Really? Is that how we also have to not just us do passive resistance.
Right.
these guys that are cops that are our friends,
Yep.
we need to talk to them about this.
Yep.
We need to make them recognize, don't be a capo. Don't be the Jew that beat other Jews in the death camps so that you can keep your job.
Yep.
You've got to start realizing that this is part of a bigger picture, and we don't want you. And in other countries, you're seeing the cops take off their helmets and joining the protesters in Europe. Yes. I think that's awesome.
I do too. And it's about personal responsibility, right?
Yes.
And that goes when we talked about informed consent too with our healthcare workers. You can't just say, oh, well, that was just doing my job. You're talking about lives here.
Right. And remember, we told the Germans that wasn't an excuse.
That's right.
You weren't just doing your job. And here's the thing, and I keep telling people this, the death camps, like Auschwitz wasn't run by Eichmann or by any one guy. It was run by lots of little everyday people and a
just
few nasty guys. Okay. The bakers, the guys that swept the floors, that drove the trucks, that did this. And had they not they just said, I'm not going to work here anymore. Yep. Before it got to be a deadly proposition, because see, right now, if you work for Pfizer or you work for a hospital that's forcing you to be a vaccine nurse, or you work for somebody, you can walk away from it and they're not going to kill you. But if we don't take our world back, it's going to come to the fact that they are going to kill you. Yep. It always does. Whether it was the Soviet Union, it Pol Pot, it always comes to that unless you take it back early. And you have to recognize that that's where we're going, that people are doing bad things to your children. The use of force in medicine is never justified. Yep. Don't go along with it. When you start to see people wearing the mask and there's no mandate, shaming other people, we're in troubled waters. Right. And if you listen to, I'm blanking on her name now, Vera Sharpoff, or she's a 90-some-year-old, very eloquent Canadian
Holocaust survivor.
I think she's a Holocaust, and I think she's in Canada, the Holocaust survivor. And one of the things she says is, she said, the way they got normal people that would have been our friends, that were our friends, to go along with, just at least passively, with them rounding up the Jews, was to convince them we were diseased. Yes, which is what we're going to see now with the unvaccinated, as friends and family are coming and telling me that their own family members and friends have told them that they won't be around them because they're unvaccinated. Right. And that's they're going to have to put up with that for right now. There's two options. So back on what do we do? There's two options. One is that you accede to it and you become part of the problem, shedding on other people, or you become your own problem because you've now done unknown genetic change to yourself. I mean, that's just, how much coercion does it take? If you believe that can be happening, I don't think you're going to really be coerced into it. So I feel bad. I had an elderly lady that was told by her kids she couldn't go see her grandkids, couldn't see her great grandchild without getting a vaccine. And I said, look, I know that's heartbreaking, but I'm just saying this as a physician. In my opinion, it's not, and this is not official medical advice, I said, but in my opinion, it's not going to, that's not going to protect your grandchild. And in fact, in a few months, it's going to be obvious that it's not the unvaccinated dying. So give it a while. And then, revisit it. It might be important that you're here for that grand or great grandchild, Wow. So I think you need to not roll over right now as much as you might want to. Send photos. We've got to do something, because the rest of us need, if in fact this is a depopulation agenda, then we need people to stay alive to keep humanity going. We need an army of non-vaccinated people to fight back if it comes to this. Again, we're all speculative. This may not be what it's going, but well, there's certainly enough very wise, intelligent people looking at this from this perspective. I saw a meme the other day that said, clean sperm is the new Bitcoin. I've heard that. And Michael Yaden has finally really come out and said, the ex-CEO of Pfizer. To kill us. Yes, their goal is to kill millions of people. Okay, this is, that, and I followed him. He was pro-vaccine. He was right. I know. That's what I'm saying. I have followed him since last February, and his initial complaint was as an insider scientist saying, how can they be doing this PCR test this way? That's false science. But he never came out to say they're doing this on purpose. He said, listen, people, wake up. You got the,
He was
you're
slowly
citing
trying
too much.
to raise awareness.
Yeah, let's go back to science here. Let's follow the science. And then he realized they don't care about the science.
No.
This is about a takedown. And now he's screaming at the top of his lungs, don't listen to these guys.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate what he's done, because that
Me
took
too.
some courage on his part for his position.
Oh, so many of you are showing such great courage. And I, for one, am so grateful to you and for the team that you work with. I don't know where we'd be without voices like yours.
Well,
So
thanks a
thank you
lot
so
for
very
having me
much.
on, because it's the alternative media like you guys that are making this possible. Think where we would be if all we had were 3 channels like the BBC and when we used to have ABC, CBS, CNN, whatever. If we just had those guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Well, you
we'd all be
consider this your
marching
home
to oblivion.
podcast. You can come on here whenever you like if you've got something to say.
Sure.
I
I'll let
would
you
love
know.
that.
Well, I just tell people, don't make any rash decisions, even if you don't believe us. Just don't
Wait it
jump
out.
into the small end of the pool. Just wait a while. It's gonna.
Yeah.
I think the good news here, by the way, I think we're going to win, and I think one of the good news is that it's going to be so obvious that they're not going to be able to lie. You know, one of my favorite quotes is Boris Yeltsin. He said, "You can sit on a throne of bayonets, but you can't sit on it forever." And that's what's going to happen here. The lie is going to fall apart.
Yeah.
That's
And
why
maybe
they
this
have
is an
to-
opportunity for a new
Yeah.
shift in our medical system.
I hope so. I hope so, because it was not going, they were already killing people by omission and commission,
Yeah.
and they weren't awake to it.
Mhm.
Okay. I give you a little bit of a moral pass in medicine when you were doing things and you really did believe that it was in the best interest of patients, but you were misguided. But now I think you need to wake up and realize there's evil afoot. You can't be part of it if you really are a physician.
Yeah. That's a great place to end. Thank you, Dr. Merritt, for being here today. Really
Thanks
appreciate
again.
you.
Always enjoy it.
One last time, where do people find you?
Oh, it's 3 words, themedicalrebel.com. The Medical Rebel. And by the way, so if you want to know some facts, before you do anything else, push the big red button on the top right and go to the information, because I have people that bypass the big red button that tells you everything. Just, where can I get hydroxychloroquine? And I just can't answer all the emails. I'm sorry. So
I'm sure.
push the big red button and then you'll get the information.
Perfect.
themedicalrebel.com.
Perfect. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. And have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too.
If the naturally inspired movement makes sense to you, let's do this together and transform the medical model and help people take charge of their health. Learn more about how you can join the Naturally Inspired movement by going to naturallyinspiredadvocate.com or call me at 970-475-4862.